This program was made possible by the grassroots volunteers of United Monroe.
Hello, Hudson Valley. I'm Emily Convert, and I am so pleased to have with me today probably our most esteemed guest so far to date, State Assemblyman James Skoufis.
Good to be here, and hopefully you have many more esteemed guests than me in the future, but it's great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, and thank you for all the work that you do, and your executive committee. I said it a few nights ago at the informational meeting. You don't get paid for this. You do it because you love your community, and you all do a tremendous job.
Coming from you, that's very appreciated. Thank you,
Thanks.
And thank you for coming to our organizational and informational meeting.
I thought it was terrific. It's important. I think you're using pretty much any medium that you can. We're on TV now. You've got the blogcasts going. Mm-hmm. You've got Facebook. You've got emails. But it's important to have that face-to-face on occasion too, to keep people posted. So I thought it was a great event.
That's true. And what someone said a day or so after that meeting, which it didn't even occur to me to think of that, but they said it was really nice to come to a United Monroe event that was free.
It costs a lot of money to be in politics, to be able to be on the advocacy end of issues. Mm-hmm. I think most people understand that, though.
Right.
You've got to raise money.
I think they do too, but
it's funny comment, though.
And it came from a mayor, which I thought was really funny. But I guess what's first and foremost on our minds in Monroe and United Monroe organization, and in Woodbury, where you have your constituents as well, is the KJ annexation issue.
Sure. And this isn't, certainly it has come to the forefront with the Monroe petitions that, let's be real, KJ, the village of KJ, has initiated. Right. But the idea of annexation is not new in itself. I mentioned this at the informational meeting. We in Woodbury had an annexation petition back in 2012. Put forward by Zygmunt Brock, a KJ developer, mm-hmm. and the village of Curious Joel itself. And we were able to really beat back that petition, and that land is still now in Woodbury 3 years later. So that's number one, is this can be done. This isn't some impossible feat trying to prove that an annexation petition is not in the overall public interest. And the second piece of it is I think what you're all doing and will continue to do is that you're raising awareness that this is the most critical issue in Monroe and the surrounding areas. It takes a lot of resources and effort and information to be able to, especially when you don't have a local government on your side, mm-hmm. to be able to push back against an annexation petition like this that is hostile in nature. And so it's a long process. We saw the DEC commissioner come down with a lead agency decision not too long ago, and they picked the village of Curious Joel. I did not want to see that. I know you did not want to see that.
Right.
Most people did not want to see that happen. But as I've said before, the alternative wasn't so great either.
Right.
Once it got whittled down to the town of Monroe and the village of Curious Joel, is there really any more trust in the town of Monroe running the environmental review than there is
the like
village of Curious
KJ
Joel?
Light, essentially.
It's pick your poison.
Right.
And again, the one difference that I see that I guess would have made the town of Monroe a slightly better choice is the open government aspect of it, in that we all know when the town of Monroe board meets, we're able to attend meetings. The village of KJ operates in secrecy, mm-hmm. and it's near impossible to follow what actions the village board there in KJ is taking. So that's really the only difference that I can see between the town board and the village board. But it is a first step in a very, very long process. The environmental review itself will probably take quite a number of months. There has to be a public hearing. There has to be a joint meeting and vote between the town and village boards, and then whatever legal action winds up happening thereafter, or perhaps even before then. So it's a long process. You can certainly speak to the legal stuff better than I can. That's being looked at, but nonetheless, you know that you have my support in my official capacity, and also as someone who lives here and is part of the Monroe Woodbury community myself. So it's true. Again, I tip my cap to you and everyone else that's involved in really, like I said, you don't have a town board, or in Woodbury, that was the difference. That was the difference between what's going on here and what's going on in Woodbury 3 years ago, is that we had a town of Woodbury board and a village of Woodbury board that stood up for its constituents and said, we do not support this annexation. We are going to fight against it. You don't have that here in Monroe, at least at the present time.
Right.
And that's where you step in, and you've done that.
I think that's such a key point, and I think that's something we've been trying to drill home for so long, is that we do not have representation. And it's amazing how many people are so checked out. They don't, they're not interested. Yeah. They say, I'm not political. And
it's a lot more than politics.
It has nothing to do with parties. It's this quality of life stuff. This is major stuff.
And it speaks to who we are as a society, who we are as a state. Annexation has its purposes, has its legitimate purposes. It's not a rare thing that happens around New York State, and usually it's a mutually agreeable situation between two different municipalities. Right. But annexation law is not there to allow one municipality to take another municipality's land whenever it runs out of room to build. Right. That's the difference here. Right. And I've used this analogy before. It's like the Bronx running out of room to build and saying, oh, no worries, we'll just take some of Westchester's land. Right. That's not how society works. Right. So, it speaks to who we are as a law-abiding society. And unfortunately, as we all know, the leadership in Curious Joel oftentimes does not have that same respect for law that most others do. That's very politely stated. I would say for flagrant abuse, but I guess I have the ability to do that. Sure. But going back to what you were just saying about the DEC, from where I'm sitting, it felt to me as though it's a no-brainer when you look at the two municipalities on paper. Like, I mean, you and I know, and everyone in Monroe knows that our town board was elected by, the pressure of the leadership of Curious Joel and their dictation to the citizens to vote in that direction. But on paper, the village of Curious Joel has so many violations, so EPA and DEC, and you look at the town of Monroe, and you see that they have a planning board that functions, they have a zoning board that functions. Like you said, you're able to FOIL documents. There's a little bit of transparency there. So take all politics aside and who's really working for who, and you look at them on paper, you can clearly see that the town of Monroe would be the more appropriate choice based on those factors. So it begs the question, why? Right. What's the real reason here? Right. And even, a couple of things to add to what you just said. Again, we know, we're certain that the village of Curious Joel is behind these annexation petitions. Yes. These aren't, as the leadership would try and lend us to believe, these aren't independent homeowners filing petitions saying, we would rather live in KJ than the town of Monroe. This is being initiated and driven by the leadership in KJ. And so knowing that especially, SECRA in itself is something of a conflict of interest driven process. Right. But on top of that, knowing that the leadership is behind these petitions, it's far beyond a conflict of interest. It's something where they simply cannot objectively look at these petitions. True. And then on the other hand, though, and I'm certainly not defending the DEC commissioner, but you look at what the village and KJ submitted to try and present the case for them to be a lead agent versus what the town board in Monroe submitted. They may as well use crayons and sent it a few pieces of loose leaf to the DEC. I mean, that's how pathetic their submission was.
It was a joke.
But then the DEC commissioner clearly, and I don't know what the motivations were, but when you read the actual decision that he came down with, sort of suggesting that well-planned, high-density zoning is able to better preserve open space and parkland. He's living in another universe if he believes that this is going to be the case in the village of KJ.
Indeed.
So it's frustrating to see that. There's no doubt about it.
It is, and I thank you again for speaking out at the Curious Joel scoping session that occurred as part of the process of the annexation, because everything you stated was about how, yes, indeed, the leadership of Curious Joel is entirely orchestrating this, and you laid it out beautifully.
It's a certainty.
Yeah.
You know that I wrote a letter to the DEC commissioner way back when the Monroe Woodbury School District was interested in being lead agent, and we, as you also know, we're working on some legislation now. John Allegro and some others and I don't want to, have the cat released from the bag quite yet. That will hopefully hold the players involved in this and other, similar situations around the state a little bit more accountable.
Which is wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Next on my sloppy piece of paper, I have the subject of ethics reform, which in the current climate in the state is important. But before you jump into that, I come across a lot of people, and I don't doubt that you do, who really aren't familiar with what a state assemblyman does.
Sure.
Do you find that to be the case?
I get that on occasion.
I mean, as unfortunate as that is, I think it's a reality. I think people don't understand government as well as...
It's a good first sort of segue question before we get to the other issues.
Great.
So we're in New York State, and this might change as one of the discussions going on right now. We are in legislative session for 6 months out of the year, January to roughly the end of June, beginning of July. And that's the period when I'm in Albany the majority of the time, and we're passing bills, and we're debating legislation, we have committee meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And the budget. The budget's due April 1st. That's probably the biggest task that we have as a legislature is to pass the budget and hopefully do it on time. And in recent history, that is one of the improvements that we've seen in Albany, is that we have started passing budgets on time. If you remember back to the Patterson and Spitzer and Pataki days, you had budget negotiations going into September, sometimes later, and that's causes a lot of problems with municipalities, with school districts getting aid, and it's just sort of a scar on a symbolic scar on how Albany is functioning or not functioning. We can't even pass a budget even remotely on time. So that's one thing we've done a little bit better for on-time budget so far. In the past 4 years. So what do? That's the legislative end. I have my own bills. Other people have their own bills, and we try and pass the things that we think are important. We try and defeat the things we think are harmful to New York State and to our constituents. That time, and then after June, July, people think we're part-time legislators. It's perhaps for some that's true. I know that there are some legislators, I'd probably say about a third or so, if I had to guess, that do have significant outside income as attorneys or in real estate or whatever it might be. But the majority of us, myself included, this is my full-time job. So when I'm not in Albany, I'm working out of my district office in Chester, and I probably put in on average 60 hours a week, in session or not in session, and that means dealing with constituent issues. That means having community meetings. When I'm not in Albany, one of the nice things is that you're able to really tackle a lot of the local community issues with a lot more time and energy and focus than when you're spending 50+% of the time, 2 hours north in Albany, in the capital. So, I'm not a part-time legislator, and I work year-round, full-time, and so
you're everywhere.
I try.
Absolutely everywhere, and you're so accessible and such an amazing communicator with your public, and that's why you just got reelected.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And people, I've got that reputation, which I'm proud of being accessible and being out there.
Yes.
And, last year, the election, I'm a Democrat, I make no bones about it. I work well with Republicans, but, last year, Andrew Cuomo, the governor, lost our assembly district by 16% of the vote, the 99th assembly district. That's, all things else being equal, Democrats and Republicans run, with the top of their ticket.
Right.
The governor was a top race last year, and the top Democrat lost the assembly district by 16% of the vote. And in fact, I was the only Democrat, Congress, Attorney General, Comptroller, Governor, who won the Assembly District, and I like to think that speaks to what you just shared, and that is, the accessibility, the local issues, keeping an emergency room open or fighting an annexation. That's not a Democratic or Republican issue. That's just simply the right thing to do, and it's a local issue that people care about.
Absolutely.
So that's sort of the perspective that I come from.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And answering the call to do a public access television show. That's another one of your...
My pleasure.
on a Sunday evening. So, thank you. But back to the ethics.
Yeah. So, it's an interesting time in Albany right now, especially in the state assembly. The speaker that just was removed, Sheldon Silver, had been there for 20 plus years.
Right.
And unless you, as an assembly person, have been in the institution for over 20 years, this has never happened in your time in Albany. And certainly someone who's been there 2 years, it certainly has not even, remotely.
Yeah, it's historic.
It's historic.
Yeah.
And amidst the challenges of finding a new speaker and trying to continue to assert ourselves as an assembly institution in the budget negotiations, etc., come opportunity. I think one of the opportunities is ethics reform. A number of us have been pushing for ethics reform for some time. Past 2 years, I've sponsored a bill, for instance, that we actually need a constitutional amendment, believe it or not, to do this, that would strip legislators and lawmakers of their state taxpayer pensions if they become convicted of felonies. Right now, we have politicians in jail who are still collecting their state pensions. So, we've pushed on a number of levels, different reforms, not very successfully as an institution. So now we have a new speaker. A number of us have sort of stepped in and said we want this to be a priority. And I hope, beyond just that pension issue, I hope that we look at outside income. I don't have any, like I said.
Right.
And I guess it's easy for me to say, we should cap or ban outside income. But if you look at some of the scandal that has rocked Albany in recent years, a lot of it comes from these conflicts from outside jobs and outside income.
Right.
So I hope that we can at least cap the outside income. I know people are talking about banning it completely, and per diem reform needs to happen right now. When a legislator goes to Albany and you stay in a hotel overnight or your meals or whatever, you don't even need to submit receipts to get that refund for yourself. And so, that's something that's such a no-brainer.
That sounds... I'm really surprised to hear that.
It's crazy. And I think most people don't know that.
No, I would have never imagined that.
One of the legislators who's under indictment now, still serving, is under indictment because of alleged abuse with this per diem system.
Wow.
So, I think there are a number of things that we can do. I believe in empowering the rank and file a little bit more than we have in the past. It's a very leadership-driven institution. And while there's something to be said for that, we also need to make sure that we're not suppressing good ideas from someone who's been there even, a few weeks or a year or 5 years, whatever it is. You shouldn't have to wait till you become a committee chairman in order to express yourself more effectively than someone who's been there and, is new.
That's true.
So I think we have an opportunity here. We'll see what happens. I'm pushing for a lot of these reforms. And I think we'll find out perhaps in the budget whether we're successful or not.
Great. I know that at a a few months back, there was that panel discussion that was hosted by the Orange County Democratic Women, and you were one of the speakers selected to, and you talked about how many people, and particularly in your assembly district, who are commuters.
That's right.
And I think that leads into into the infrastructure question.
Yeah, depending on where you are in the assembly district I represent, you're either a bedroom community with a lot of New York City commuters, or if you go out further west, it becomes a lot more rural in the Goshen, Wawayanda, Hamptonburg area, and many fewer commuters in those communities. Sure. But certainly in the eastern part of Orange County, including Monroe and North Rockland, where I also represent, you do have a lot of people who, whether it's to Westchester or to New York City or wherever it might be, spend a significant amount of time on the road or on the rails or on the bus getting to work.
Right.
And I was one of them before the state assembly. I commuted down to New York City, usually by bus. And so, there are a couple of items that are long, long overdue. First is the interchange, the exit 131 in front of Woodbury Common. It was supposed, this is an approved DOT project, was supposed to have started construction actually 2 years ago in 2013, and out of the blue, prior to 2013, I think it was in 12, we were told on the town board and the village board where I was serving, we don't have the money. 2017 is the earliest we'll be starting this. And if you've ever sat in that sometimes hour-plus long gridlock on, a Friday evening or whatever it is, especially when it's a holiday weekend, you know how terrible that situation is in front of Woodbury Common. And so this interchange project would, by and large, alleviate all of that Commons traffic. And so that's something that I've been pushing for. We're talking a lot about this $5 billion surplus that we have in New York State now, and using much of it for infrastructure. I hope that project is looked at. We also have this year, and this is very timely, an MTA capital program that is being negotiated. This happens every 5 years. The current one is the 2015 to 2019 capital program that we're discussing. And I've been meeting with my Orange and Rockland County colleagues, and I've been organizing us to sort of act as one voice in the legislative negotiations that are going on for this program. And just on the Port Jervis line that runs through Orange County, as you know, the service is, to put it kindly, inadequate. The trains are sporadic. There's like 1 or 2 midday trains. Forget about it in the evening. Trying to go into the city. God forbid if you're working a night shift. There's simply very, very little service. And so 2 things need to happen. First, we need a double track. Right now there's only a single track on the whole Port Jervis line, so you can't have trains going at the same time. You need to literally wait for one train to go all the way down before you can send another train all the way up. That's a problem. So a double track, and then also something called a midway yard. We have a yard all the way out in Port Jervis right now, and then we have a yard in Suffern. There's no yard in the middle, and this is a place where trains can park, and that's where you can start rides and where you can end rides. And so most of the passenger traffic comes in the eastern end of Orange County. I think these studies have already been done, so the feasibility is set. They've already done that. We wouldn't even have to wait for that. And they've looked at a midway yard at either the Salisbury Mills Cornwall train station or the Campbell Hall train station. And putting a midway yard there, we'd be able to just shoot rides from that yard. And knowing that there are more passengers at Harriman and Salisbury Mills Cornwall and Rockland County, we'd be able to shuttle more trains back and forth from that yard rather than fewer trains coming all the way from Port Jervis. So that's what we're talking about. These are really important issues to a lot of people. And hopefully we can deliver at least some of them in the budget.
Well, that's very hopeful. I know one of the reasons why I moved up here was because I knew that there was a train, and I heard that the governor of New Jersey was
Secaucus,
was going to be making it a direct route into the city.
That's the mother of all improvements.
That is, and it stopped during the recession. And
so you're talking about the ARC project. This was basically shovels were in the ground, and Governor Christie killed the project. One of the components was that it would have created a loop at Secaucus Junction. So instead of having to transfer there, if you live in Orange and Rockland counties or North Jersey, you can just stay on the train and zip right into Manhattan. it's a one-seat ride, as they call it.
Yep.
And I think it would have been a game changer. I'm still hoping
Agreed.
that someday in the near future it will be a game changer. You're talking about property values that would go up. You're talking about it's a quality of life issue. Instead of having to transfer, it's 10 less minutes off your commute each way, possibly. And it's a productivity, economic development issue. If you have a business looking at the Hudson Valley and they need to ride the train and travel to New York City a lot, the other side of the river has an edge.
Right. That's right.
We need to be able to offer similar transportation options that Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess are able to offer now if we're going to try and compete with them. I mean, that's just a matter of reality.
Absolutely. We only have a few more minutes.
Sure, I know we've got lots to talk about.
It's gone so fast. What are we going to do? So, I'm going to leave it up to you to decide, because I have tuition-free bill for college. But if you want, if there's something more urgent, more pressing in Albany that you think,
I'll try and touch on a couple things.
Okay.
First, the tuition bill. This is something that I'm very proud of, and I introduced the legislation last year, and it brings us back to the good old days in this respect, where SUNY and CUNY used to be tuition-free.
Yeah.
Right now, it costs many, many thousands of dollars per year to be able to go to even the public colleges here in New York State. We had been for so long holding up our SUNY and CUNY system as, the still quality yet affordable alternative to the expensive private colleges, and we've gotten away from that mission. So, I've incorporated a community service component into it, and it moves us back into a direction of making college more affordable. I didn't copy President Obama. He just came out with his proposal to make community colleges tuition-free not too long ago.
Right.
And I'm glad, since I introduced that, besides what President Obama introduced, Tennessee, the most Republican of Republican states in the country, they have tuition-free community college starting last year. That was after I introduced the bill. So I'm hoping that we as a nation, we as a state are beginning that conversation with a little bit more focus. And how do we make college more affordable? Not just how do we limit the tuition increases every year. And taxes, I want to touch on that because I know that that's an important issue for a lot of people.
Yep.
We have a proposal on the table in budget negotiations that I'm actually very excited about. It's this is a little bit of lingo, but it's called a circuit breaker, and effectively, if you pay more than 6% of your annual income towards property taxes, you will get tax relief, as the proposal is structured now. And if you pay a lot more, then you'll get a little bit more tax relief. If you make a little bit less, you get a little bit more tax relief. So it's structured based on really how much property taxes are hurting you as a homeowner.
which is terrific.
Which is great.
Because it'll change the whole dynamic completely, especially when it comes to people on fixed incomes, seniors wanting to remain in their homes, which is helpful for the schools as well, not to have it be overburdened with too many students.
That's right. So I'm hoping that we can keep that in the budget. I'm fighting to keep that in the budget. And we've had enough estate tax breaks, we've had enough bank tax breaks from the past couple of years. We need tax breaks for people who need it the help, need it the most, and that's those are the people with foreclosure signs on their yards and for sale signs on their yards. They're the ones that need help.
Right. That is very true.
Yep. So we'll see. It should be an exciting year, there's no doubt.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited for your re-election. I was very excited to be part of your really amazing swearing in.
I'm glad you could be there.
It was a packed house on an icy day, and that says everything people need to know about you and how excited people are to have you as their representative.
That means a lot. Thank you.
In the 99th district.
Yep. And looking forward to the next 2 years and continuing to work with you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for coming today. We're very excited to have State Assemblyman here with us on Hello Hudson Valley, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.